Welcome, history fanatics, to Mrs. Heron's video playlist, where you will get the best of the best in social studies.
We're beginning with Unit 1, Where in the World Map Skills. The unit goal is analyze various types of maps of differing complexities. It includes Part 1 from Core Concepts, which is Tools of Geography, and Part 3 from Core Concepts, Climates and Ecosystems. Alright, we are still in Part 3, Climates and Ecosystems, starting Section 2, Temperature. The guiding question today, why are most of the tropics warm all year? Depending on what part of the world you live in, your exposure to Earth's sunlight may be more or less than in other parts. Too bad for this guy, he obviously didn't check how hot the weather was going to be today. As you've learned in the past and through your science courses, the Earth gets its heat from the sun's electromagnetic energy, or radiation. If the Earth received equal amounts of sunlight, we would lose our seasons, and instead it would remain one season all year around in every part of the world. Weather would be forever changed, and unpredictable changes would be a constant threat. Luckily, the Earth is actually tilted on its axis, meaning that the planet receives different amounts of sunlight every day all across the Earth. This also means that some places are going to be warmer than other places. Let's have a closer look. The Earth can be divided into 3 zones: the tropics, temperate zones, and the polar zones. When I think about the zones, I like to think of them as 3 siblings, and the parents are the sun. The tropics, also called the low latitudes, are the youngest child. They lie between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn, and they think they're hot stuff, literally. So they get the most attention from the sun. The sun is almost overhead all year round in the tropics, making it the hottest zone to live in. Next you have the temperate zones, also called the middle latitudes. They're the middle child. These zones have to put up with the heat from the tropics in the summer and the too cool for school cold from the polar zones in the winter. And the rest of the year they get to act as their moderate temperature self, meaning they get just the right amount of attention from the sun. Finally, the oldest child, the one that gives everyone the cold shoulder. These are the polar zones, also called the high latitudes. They lie between the Arctic and Antarctic circles because they're trying to get as far away as possible from the sun and the tropics. Here, people can expect to get cold to bitter cold temperatures all year round. Now, I already mentioned how if the Earth were not on its axis, we would lose our seasons. This tilt makes the temperature change throughout the year. To examine the seasons more closely, let's go to Australia. In January, the temperatures are in the high 90s and 100s on average. So in the southern hemisphere, it must be summer. But let's go up to our home state, Oklahoma. Now the temperature has dropped to between 30 and 0 degrees in January, making it winter in the northern hemisphere. 6 months later, and the opposite is true. Now it's winter in the southern hemisphere between 32 and 68 degrees, and summer in the northern hemisphere between 68 and 100 degrees. One thing to keep in mind is that the western hemisphere has a higher altitude on average than the eastern hemisphere, making the temperatures drop lower on average, even during the summer. Remember, the higher the altitude, the lower the temperature. To review, today we studied the zones of latitude, also known as the climate zones. These included the tropics, the temperate zones, and the polar zones. Tropics are the areas between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. Temperate zones are those middle latitudes. Those are the areas between the tropics and the polar zones. And the polar zones are north of the Arctic Circle and south of the Antarctic Circle. The last bit that we studied was how altitude affects temperature. I can't wait to join you next time for Section 3.5, Types of Climate.